Hi guys, I'm here today to talk to you about concealers. I'm going to give you 20 hacks that you can use in your day-to-day life with concealers. So, tip number 1 is, when do you apply your concealer? Before or after your foundation? This can be a little tricky because it depends on what you're doing when you're concealing. Are you trying to color correct, or are you just trying to provide more coverage to a certain area? If you're trying to color correct, you're going to do it first. So for our green and our white, you would do these first. Or in some rare cases where you're not using a concealer, but you might be using a shadow sense or something else to that effect to color correct dark blue or purple circles, which you'd be using an orange tone or an orange tone foundation, then you would also do that first. Okay, so color correcting comes first. Tip number 2, when you are brightening under your eyes, we have always been taught in our youth to do it in a circle-like manner. When in actuality, to really brighten and lift the eye, you want to draw it in more of a triangle-like shape. So use a flat paddle brush like I have here and draw a triangular shape leading downward. And this will direct the light upwards into your eye instead of it still looking. This is only going to enhance your dark circles and make it look like this is going to be more pronounced in a circular motion. So you can do this first. I recommend doing it first. I like using white underneath, but you also, if you have very dark circles like purples or blues and the white isn't brightening enough, you may want to do a layer of an orange based or peach based color first. Okay, tip number 3. If you are applying eyeshadow, depends on what kind of shadows you're using. If you're using a powder shadow, it's really good to set your eyes with, or prime your eyes with a concealer. They do sell eyeshadow primers, but you can save yourself some money by doubling up your concealer. It will be just as effective. Now, if you're using SeneGence products, our shadow sense doesn't crease or fall out, so you don't have that issue. But I still recommend doing this because just by doing that, I'm canceling out any of the veins in my eyelids, so I'm going to get a much more even coverage and a nicer looking eye by doing so. Number 4, if you have a pimple, which we all get from time to time, you're going to want green concealer to cover that up. I prefer to do this under the foundation because it just really takes the red out. So I just put a dab of that, and I usually like to use like a fluffy brush in this case because I feel like when you're using a flat brush, it can pull, especially because pimples can be a little more oily. So it can pull. So anywhere else that you have red, go ahead. I just dab it on and I want to let it dry. And the fluffy brush just touches it lightly enough, very light pressure. Very light pressure, and you're going to go ahead and dab that to any pink areas. So even if your cheeks are a little pink, go ahead and dab that on those pink areas as well, so that you can, 1, use all of the goodness that you get from your green concealer and don't waste any, and 2, it will just cancel out the additional pink. Tip number 5, if you do have a pimple on your chest or your back, shoulders, and you're going to be wearing like a revealing dress or going out, you will want to use your green concealer in those areas as well. And let that dry and then touch it with the same color concealer as your skin tone. So for me, that would be light. So I would let that green dry, and then I would lightly set it with the light concealer and a setting powder. Tip number 6. If you find yourself without concealer, you can use your foundation as a concealer. What you would do is just apply a very small portion to whichever area you are using to cover, and you're going to let it sit. And if you just lightly apply it to whatever you're covering and let it sit for 30 seconds or so, then it's going to dry to a thicker consistency and set heavier than it would as a foundation. So you would just, after 30 seconds, you would lightly tap it or brush it, and that is going to act like a concealer and not be as sheer of a coverage. If you apply foundation right away, it's going to be more sheer. But again, letting it dry a little bit will thicken the consistency and work in a pinch. Tip number 7, choose a concealer that's slightly lighter than your natural skin tone. So for me, we're going to use white. Now in the summertime, I would use light, but it is winter and my skin's pretty pale. So again, we're going to go back to that white to brighten. For this step, you're going to want to use a concealer brush that's dome shaped so you can get into the areas that we're going to talk about. So we already covered this to cancel out any veins with the light, but now I want to brighten. So I'm going to brighten around the outer V of the eye. So just lightly going over the top and bottom. It's going to make me look like I actually got some sleep when I didn't, or if you're hungover or not feeling well. Okay, so you want to brighten right there. You also want to brighten the center of the eyelid, the very middle center of your eyelid, and you also want to brighten underneath the brow bone. These are just areas that you want to hide. Tip number 8, we lightly discussed this before when we were talking about putting white under the eyes, but for those of you that have very dark purple or blues under your eyes, you are going to want to use orange or peach to cancel that out. So while I don't necessarily have that problem, I just want to demonstrate for you. You're going to want to use your third reading finger to apply and just dab in the areas where you see the purple or blue dark circles. So you would just pat it with the light with this finger because it gives the lightest amount of pressure until it sets on both eyes. Just a thin layer, guys. Also, if this is a problem that you've had long term, you might want to consider talking to your distributor about getting our dark under eye circle treatment, because I actually did used to have this problem, but I don't anymore, and it's because I've been using that product and our eye cream, which is an amazing combo for people who really get those dark under eye circles. Tip number 9. If you want to cancel an uneven skin tone, if you really just want to get a nice even coverage of your skin, our color correcting tinted moisturizer, which while not a concealer, does conceal, primarily because it is green and yellow based. So the green automatically cancels out a lot of the pink tones, and the yellow will cancel out and correct any uneven skin tones. This is like magic in a bottle for pigmentation issues if you do not have a smooth consistency to your skin tone. So definitely after you apply your concealer, the color correcting tinted moisturizer will be your best friend to have the most even coverage of pigment on your face. Number 10, to brighten under your eyes, you can use our eye illuminator, which is a highlighter mixed with an eye cream. This is going to be magic for under your eyes because it is working to reduce fine lines and wrinkles at the same time, because it's mixed with our pearlizer and concealer to give you some color correction and brightening. So I like to put this under my foundation just because I think for me, it probably depends on your age, but I think for me, being over 30, if I put it on top of my foundation, it's just a little too shimmery. But when I put it under, it just really, number 1, feels amazing on my skin, and 2, brightens fabulously. Also, you can put this on the outer areas of your temples and just above your brow, kind of on the inner side of your brow and above your brow. Our eye cream, if you haven't used it yet, is fabulous. Tip number 11, after applying all the concealer under your eyes, and especially in areas where it might settle in little wrinkles or fine lines, you're going to want to either blot that excess off with a beauty blender, a tissue, or my favorite is just a flat face brush. What you do is, one thing is it's also kind of pressing it in, because sometimes it's not that it's settled, it's just that it never got there into the wrinkles or fine lines or the deeper crevices into your skin. So I find by pressing with this face brush or a beauty blender, it really sets the product. So can you see the difference just from doing that? So it's really going to set that product, and if there is excess, it's going to pull that excess off. So this is my favorite tip for doing with your foundation and your concealer to really make sure you've got long-lasting coverage. Another tip, if you're extremely oily, is to get our oil absorbent sheets. And if you find yourself getting oily throughout the day, you're just going to take one of these. Tip number 12, you're going to contour using a concealer that is 2 shades darker than your skin tone with our deep. And I prefer to contour under my foundation because I feel like it comes out more naturally. So you can do it over or under. You're just going to want to make sure you blend really good if you do it over. But I just contour a little bit on my cheekbones So we'll start there, and you're going to want to use a flat contour brush, which is going to have an angle and a flat top. And you're just going to kind of make a kissy face and move that brush along. The goal is to create a dark shadow that will lift your cheekbones. It depends on your face shape, all of the areas you're going to contour, but for my face shape, especially by putting the concealer on underneath and then applying with your color correcting tinted moisturizer, I'm going for a medium to full, not completely full. So I'm just going to go ahead and put one pump of that on my hand. And my shade is light. This comes in light, medium, or deep, and it's very forgiving because it goes up or down up to 3 skin tones. So it doesn't have to match your skin tone exactly when you first apply. It will adapt as it sets. So what I do is I put some on the brush and I just dab it in all the areas that are not my contour areas first, just to kind of spread it around. So my nose, my under eyes, underneath my contour here, my forehead in the center, my chin, and then down my neck. Okay, that's just to get it like, this is where your color correcting tinted moisturizer or foundation comes into play. Depending on how much coverage you like, color correcting tinted moisturizer is generally considered a sheer to medium, depending on how thick or how many layers, but you can actually get full coverage. Tip number 14. Now that we've got our foundation or our BB cream or our tinted moisturizer on, this is where you're going to put foundation on top or concealer on top. So if you do need to have additional coverage in any particular areas, this is where you're going to pick a concealer that actually matches your skin tone. So again, we have light, medium, or deep, and they also color correct or color adapt, just like the CCTM. So if I notice that my pimple maybe didn't get all the coverage that I wanted, at this point, this is where I'm going to set a little bit of that light anywhere where I feel like I just need a bit more coverage, okay? So maybe my birthmark, anywhere that I just feel like could use a little more. And then you can use another fluffy brush like I was showing you with the green, or you could use your third ring finger. Number 15, to frame in your brows, if you would like to have a more clean and framed brows, or if you maybe even drew a little bit outside the line, you could get the same color. I just squirt it right on my hand. You could get the same color as your skin tone and dab it on a flat paddle brush, and then you can just really clean up, like, oh, maybe I came down a little bit too low here. So you can clean up your brow with a paddle brush. You can sharpen the tail, go around the top of your brow. Okay, and then you'll just blend that in with the rest of your makeup, and that will just really set off your brow, make it very, very sharp if that's something you're looking for. Tip number 16, sharpen a cat eye by using concealer and a flat paddle brush or an angle brush to clean up any area either of shadow or liner that fell out of place. This will lift your eye, and this will give a much neater, sharper look to your wing and your eye area. Basically, you want to draw in a line upwards, and this first you want to do it just kind of dabbing it in. This is going to completely lift your eye and make it just neater and cleaner, and you look spot on. And this is a lot easier to do this way to clean that up than it is to try to use a remover to do the same thing. And then I usually will take that flat brush that we use to press in the beginning to just buff that out. Tip number 17. Sometimes we want to reshape our lips. So in a way, I like to kind of make mine look a little more round and sultry. So by doing that, I overline a little here, and I bring it in a little here on the sides. So in order to make that look really sharp, a light concealer would also frame that in, much as how we did with the brows and the eyeliner. So you would get a lip brush, and just really kind of frame in Tip number 19, to create a fuller lip, get a little bit of your concealer and dab just a little teeny bit right on the inside portion of the main middle section of your lips. You're going to want to do this also before you gloss. This is going to create a fuller lip look, and you can seal that with any gloss to finish it off. Tip number 20, how to create a fuller pout using a deeper concealer to contour the base of your lip to make it look like it's coming out more, right? So we put the light concealer to give us a fuller lip here. And if we put a little bit of a dark concealer right here, we're going to create a shadow. So I'm just going to put a little dot of it on my hand. Little goes a long, long way with our concealers. They're super, super pigmented. But you're going to get a flat brush, lightly dab the ends of it in there, and then just go right against where you lined your lips with this concealer, mostly in the center, and then carry it up. Okay, and then we're going to kind of blend that down. And a little bit on the outer corners at the top. Right now it looks like I ate some chocolate and made a mess on my face. But we're going to blend that out with either a beauty blender if you have one, or just a fluffier brush. And then we're going to go over that with our face brush that already had some of our color correcting tinted moisture on it, just to set it as more of a shadow so that it hides and looks more natural. By doing that, it just makes our lips look a little bit more like it's pushed out. And it's just the final tip to having a fuller, lusher pout. So those are your 20 concealer tips. You do not have to use them all, but they're all different things that you can do with your concealer to wow, shape, define, lift your face in ways that you might not have thought of before. The other things you can do just to finish this look off when you're doing things like this is a highlight. So you can highlight with a matte. Some people don't like to have a shiny highlight. And if you did want to highlight with a matte, you'd want to highlight with 2 shades lighter than your skin tone. So if you're very pale, then use a white. If you're darker complected, use a light or a medium. And you would put that in the apples of your cheek area, down the midsection of your nose, and usually on your chin. Come up a little bit this way, and that's going to create a lift. I generally like to use pearlizer because I do like the shine, depending on the look. But if I have a very matte face, then I will just do it with the white or the light, and it'll be a perfectly matte face. But on days that I want to have a little shimmer or shine, I will use our pearlizer for that. So it's up to you, your option, but either pearlizer for highlights or light or white, depending on your skin tone, to get that upper highlight, and then that will just finish off your look. My new favorite brush is this guy, and it's a total game changer for a pearlizer. So it's a huge fan brush, super soft, super fluffy. Did you see what that does? That's just life. So, pearlizer is heaven. And then, like I said, anywhere else you want a little bit of light, I just carry whatever excess I have right there. I don't want these areas to be as shimmery as my cheekbones, so I just take the little bit left in the areas that I know need a little bit of highlight. So that's it. Thanks for hanging with me, and I hope you enjoyed your tips.